Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to MMM's Time Travel Adventures. In a previous episode, Min and Maui went back to the 16th century to discover interesting things.
We caught the moment when Leonardo da Vinci was painting the painting of Mona Lisa with our own eyes.
Meeting the most powerful woman at the time was Elizabeth I.
We were involved in the Italian War of 5051 to 5059, and witnessed more than 75,000 deaths in the war.
And today, to begin a new journey in the 7th century, the first part of the program will take part in a fierce war between France and Spain in 1635.
The war happened in the spring of 1635. It consisted of two segments, the first one being the connected conflict during the 30 Years' War, ended by the Treaty of Westphalia in 1638. The second will continue until the 1659 Treaty of the Pyrenees. The war is often considered by historians to be conclusive. We will only talk about the first segment as the show time is limited, and this is also the most interesting segment.
As we know, every war started with a reason, and this war too. The Franco-Spanish War broke out in 1631 when the French king Louis XIII threatened that his entire kingdom was bordered by Habsburg territories, including Spain.
Now let's join the war. In May, a French army of 27,000 advanced into the Spanish Netherlands, defeating a smaller Spanish force at Les Avines, before linking up with the Dutch.
In 1636, a Spanish offensive reached Corbie in northern France. Although it caused a panic in Paris, lack of supplies forced them to retreat, and it was not repeated.
As agreed at Compiègne in 1635, the French replaced Swedish garrisons in Alsace. Prior to his death in 1639, Bernard of Saxe-Weimar won a series of victories in the Rhineland, notably the capture of Breisach in December 1638. By surviving the Spanish drought, it forced Spain to refocus their armies in Flanders by the sea, which was dominated by the Dutch Navy. In 1639, they destroyed a large supply convoy in the Dowse.
5 days later, Condé, then known as Duck Dinging, defeated the Spanish army of Flanders at Rocroi, while less decisive than often thought. The loss of this highly experienced unit ended Spanish dominance of the European battlefield.
And then the moment the war stop came. The 1638 Peace of Westphalia ended the 30 Years' War and recognized Dutch independence, ending the drain of Spanish resources. However, shortly after that, France and Spain, due to economic tensions, continued the second phase of the war.
From the war we have discovered and witnessed a very powerful figure. If you want to know who it is, please watch the program.
The coat of bow is one of many great powerful manifestations given by one of the kings of France, as well as the ruler of 17th century, and robbed Louis XIV to insist he can do anything he wants.
Born September the 5th, 1638, Saint Germain-en-Laye, France, and died September the 1st, 1715, at Versailles, France, King of France, who ruled his country principally from his great palace at Versailles during one of its most brilliant periods, and who remains the symbol of absolute monarchy of the classical age. Internationally, in a series of wars between 1667 and 1697, he extended France's eastern borders at the expense of the Habsburg, and then in the War of the Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1714, engaged a hostile European coalition in order to secure the Spanish throne for his grandson.
Now Ming and Mo will tell you about interesting things that we learned after talking with Louis XIV that not everyone knows.
First few monarchs have ruled for longer. Born in 1638, Louis XIV became king at age 4 following the death of his father, Louis XIII, and remained on the throne for the next 72 years. This marks him as both the longest reigning French monarch in history and the longest resigning monarch of any extant European nation.
And the second thing is Louis' mother served as his regent. In his will, Louis XIII arranged for a regency council to rule on his young son's behalf, but his Habsburg wife Anne of Austria orchestrated an annulment of the council and took over as sole regent. In that capacity, she and her chief minister, Italian-born Cardinal Giuseppe Mazarin, then a fond of the country's noble and judges, who rose up against the crown in a series of rebellions from 1658 to 1653.
Third, he ruled without a chief minister. As a young man, Louis IV largely left the decision-making to Mazarin, his mentor and godfather. But when Mazarin died in 1661, the 22-year-old immediately informed his astonished court that he would henceforth rule without a chief minister, something no French king had done for generations.
And the fourth, Louis considered himself God's representative on earth. Although Louis XIV did not invent the divine right of kings doctrine, which held that monarchs derived their authority from God and were therefore entitled to wield absolute power. He was constantly an adherent. He was a particular point of associating himself with the Greek and Roman sun god Apollo, adopting the sun as his emblem and even playing a role in a royal ballet.
Fifth, he was quite open about his infidelities. In 1660, Louis IV married Marie Therese, a daughter of a Spain king, a politically expedient move that cemented peace between the two nations. Yet he also took on a string of mistresses, 3 of whom who gained semi-official status, appearing next to him at church and even going off with him to war.
The sixth, he was a religious bigot. A devout Catholic, Louis XIV believed in the motto, one king, one law, one faith. To that end, he mercilessly cracked down on the country's Protestants, known as Huguenots, who made up roughly 5% of the population.
7th, words before that, with countries' lives lost, diseases and famine rampant, the economy in shambles and taxes high, Louis XIV had an apparent change of heart late in life. Do not follow the bad example that I have set for you, a dying Louis told his heir. I have often done war too lightly and have sustained it for vanity. Do not imitate me, but be a peaceful prince.
In the 8th, Louis owned the Hope Diamond. The Hope Diamond is 45,52 carat stone, arguably in the most famous jewel in the world. It housed at the Smithsonian's Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C. Not until 2009, when the lead replica of the French blue turned up, that experts confirmed definitively that French blue and the Hope Diamond are one and the same.
His successor was France's second longest reigning monarch. Though in desperation he declared that 2 of his illegitimate sons could become king if his direct line died out. It never came to that, taking over at the age of 5. His great-grandson would go on to govern France for the next 59 years as Louis.
And we go to the ending. After a long journey follows as comrade of Louis XIV, we can finally conclude briefly about this king as follows.
Louis XIV was the most foremost example of monarchy that brought France to its pinnacle. He has been accused of having dug the grave of that monarchy, particularly through his religious policy, his last will, and its isolation of the court from the people.
Participated in a fierce battle, discovered a powerful man, and now come to a very important revolution in the 17th century. The Glorious Revolution. What was the Glorious Revolution? The Glorious Revolution refers to the events of 1688 to 89 that saw King James II of England deposed and succeeded by one of his daughters and her husband. Opposition leaders invited William of Orange, a Protestant who was married to James' daughter Mary, to in effect invade England. William and Mary were then crowned joint ruler. When did the Glorious Revolution occur? The Glorious Revolution took place from the 1688 to 89. The birth of his son in June raised the likelihood of a Catholic heir to the throne and helped bring discontent to a head. He arrived in November and James fled the next month. Caused the Glorious Revolution? King James II was Catholic. Many tolerated him, thinking that the throne would eventually pass to his eldest child, Mary, who was Protestant. This view changed with the birth of James' son in June 1688, as the king now had a Catholic heir. Alarmed, several prominent Englishmen invited Mary's husband, William of Orange, to invade England. Why is the Glorious Revolution significant? The Glorious Revolution permanently established Parliament as the ruling power of England and, later, the United Kingdom, representing a shift from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy.
And the time for the show has come to an end. Thank you for watching and supporting us. Please look forward to the swears. Goodbye and see you again.